Hi, everyone, and welcome back to ChompCast. As always, I'm Jordan Rico.
I'm Grace Peters.
I'm Adam Grazio.
And I'm Rafe Khan.
We have a very exciting episode for you all today. Some people build brands, some people build culture, and a few lucky ones somehow do both and still come back to teach at the place where it all started. Tyler Rutstein, our guest today, is one of those people. He came to UF as a journalism student, wrote for The Alligator, and somehow went from the college newsroom to adidas to helping build Overtime and Overtime Elite into cultural powerhouses to now leading global brand and America's marketing at Under Armour. Along the way, he's helped shape how Gen Z connects with sports, taught sports branding at UF, and proved that figuring it out as you go can actually be a career strategy. Today, he's here to talk creativity, pivots, lucky breaks, and what it really looks like to build something meaningful in both sports and culture. So please welcome Tyler Rutstein. Honestly, one of the coolest people to probably ever come out of the journalism school at our school here at UF. Let's get into it. Tyler, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. We're so excited to get to talk to you about everything because even just like taking a look at your career trajectory and your story, you've done so many different things and really have become an industry professional. So we're so excited to talk to you about all things. But just before we get into these careers and branding and all of that, can you tell us about a random interest or hobby that you have that has absolutely nothing to do with your job, absolutely nothing to do with sports or marketing? I know it might be hard because your job is so intertwined with sports and other hobbies and interests, but what's something that just no one would know?
Quite randomly, although it is related to my job, but I have become a Pinterest user and consumer, mainly first through work, now just seeing how it works. And two, I'm planning a wedding right now with my fiance, and it's probably the most, it's the easiest platform for that type of stuff.
Totally. So you have your like algorithm on Pinterest fully laid out right now.
Pretty much.
There we go.
Super user now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Pinterest is I can get in a big Pinterest hole.
Oh, yeah.
It just never ends, and I have so many boards now. It's really a scary waste of time sometimes.
Just to timestamp this for you, when I was a student at the University of Florida, one of our assignments was to start a Twitter account, now X, of course, but that was when Twitter was just becoming a thing, when you were a journalism major specifically. So the platforms have come a long way.
Incredible.
So now, if you weren't in sports branding, what would you be doing?
I would be writing movies.
Really?
Oh, okay.
What kinds of movies?
All sorts of types, probably. I would cross genres a little bit. Might start in a bit of a thriller kind of mystery vibe, but then maybe evolve to some romantic comedies if I'm able to swing it and have the writing chops for it. But probably in that space altogether.
That's
I was just gonna say, do you ever kind of take that movie interest and flip it to your career with branding and see how, like, when you're creating content, those similarities?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the best work within sports marketing or whatever you want to call it has been that crossover with either entertainment culture, which is quite obvious, or just in terms of the mediums that you're utilizing. Like when we launched our first campaign last year around football, it was a 3-minute film and not necessarily an ad. And so you take some of those learnings, you take honestly how consumption habits have changed and attention spans have changed, and you think about all those things a ton. I think Matt Damon just recently went on a podcast and I saw a clipping of it. I didn't see the full podcast, which is obviously how consumption habits have changed.
Right.
And he was talking about how hard it is to write, or how different it is to write movies these days.
Yeah.
And I thought that resonated, just in terms of it is also different how you go about marketing, whether you're creating a 30 or 60-second commercial, which was somewhat of the goal back then. And now it's completely changed across social or whatever platform you might be utilizing it for or creating for.
Yeah, and I feel like we definitely want to get into that a little bit later in the episode because I think there's so much just changing consistently, and especially for people who are interested in creative fields, interested in marketing, PR, communications. I feel like you said, it's a completely different world what we're designing for. What do you see kind of as like in your job right now, what is like the main target for what you want to do? Like, is it social media or is it influencers? What are you guys kind of focusing on when it comes to now like marketing in this new age?
We certainly focus on everything you said. I think first we think about brand, we think about the identity, we think about what our focuses are, and then we're trying to build narratives around that world, whether that's through team sports, football, baseball. We definitely are thinking about influencers differently. We're thinking about how we're building some of those narratives over the season or over the time period. Social is a big part of what we do. We try and be always on, try and be social first in everything that we're thinking through, from the first 3 seconds of our creative to how long that creative might be. I definitely see how diverse like the formats and lengths of content have become, whether you're a brand doing a 5-second teaser or sometimes a 5-minute film. I think Chanel did like a 10-minute, 30-minute film this past like 6 months, and everyone was like, wow, look at that. Like all of the norms or constructs that we've had are gone. And so I think that informs a lot of what you do, especially when you're thinking what the end in mind is. So it's been fun, but you always have to pick a lane, which makes things the most challenging, but also the most fun.
Totally. And I bet that whole process requires regular audits also, because these trends and like what people are interested in and taking in changes so regularly. So I bet that's really interesting for you guys to do and kind of see as it changes over time.
Yeah, for sure. It's always a bit of an art and science, and you want to do trailblazing work, but you also want to make sure the traditional fundamental aspects of your storytelling still hit. We also have been thinking a lot more around like how many shares something is getting, not just how many comments, not just how many impressions or views, but how are you really engaging with it, and is it cutting through culturally, which I think is a good sign of that.
We've also even found that things like comments have been really helpful with our engagement. And also, it's interesting to see what people are taking away from our episodes. So, for example, like we've had sports people and things of that nature, and people in the comments are going back and forth about what they're saying. And it's really interesting to see how people are taking that in and applying it to either their situation that's relatable or whatever that might be. So,
yeah. I really try and encourage the team to have the most fun in the comment section. Right. Yeah. I think it brings a human touch to the brand. Most recently, Under Armour was in the one of the Stranger Things finale episodes, and it was kind of like that Starbucks Game of Thrones cup. And so the internet kind of went wild with it, because if you do the math, the Stranger Things was filmed like I think or set in the 70s, and we weren't around then. We were only 30 years old as a brand, and so our logo shouldn't have been in it, but no one caught it, and they had to rush to edit it out because all the super fans caught it. We obviously saw like E-News and all these people posting about it, so we were like in the comments like, you know what you saw, and so that a lot of people were engaging with that, which was cool. And we're in this new show called Heated Rivalry. I don't know if you've seen it, but organically, we're all over this show through one of the characters, actor Francois. Yeah. And we've been having fun in the comments and with culture there as well. And so the comment section is a form of marketing and a lot of fun to be had there too.
I was also going to say, like, speaking to that, because I think, first off, what amazing 2 shows you could have had for this amount of, like...
Crazy, right?
Also, 2 Stranger Things with everyone talking about, like, the conformity gate and how, like, people were using these little tiny things, like, to have the Under Armour logo being used as, like, there's a different finale because the Under Armour logo is in there. I think that's, like, something that even just, like, said, it's these moments that kind of are accidental that will happen in PR and marketing or comms, and you can kind of, like, roll with them and choose to kind of embrace those moments as, like, a bigger moment that they can become. So I think that's just very interesting as well. I also wanted to talk about a little bit about your time at UF. Did you always know that you wanted to go into a career in marketing communications? Or I know you talked about, you wanted to potentially write movies. Have you always been this creative?
I was a journalism major in college, but I don't know if this is still the process today, but I was kind of a free agent my freshman year. You didn't have to declare a major. And I was stumbling from class to class. I had a older brother that was going into the medical field. I was thinking through like, what are my strengths and what I wanted to do. I always liked to be in class. We didn't obviously have like remote classes frequently as you have available now. And I met a professor. His name's Ted Spiker. I think he's the chair of the J School now. He's the man. And he was like, there's a lot of merit to being in the journalism school and being in journalism major. One, you get to write about what you're passionate about. So that should be a little bit easier. I always thought I had a bit of a strength in that sort of realm of the world. And at the end of the day, too, like it was probably the most immersive major, I feel like. I thought I wanted to write like brand campaigns and work at a brand. I didn't necessarily know at the time that that was a creative agency typically, and then you work with the brand. But nevertheless, I started pursuing that. I loved sports. We were on top of the world at the time. I know it's not the same experience for you right now, unfortunately, but when I became a freshman, we had just won back-to-back national championships in basketball, just won in football, and we were about to win again in football during the Tebow era was good to us. So there was no better time to really think about sports writing. I remember my capstone writing like assignment or project. I wrote something around my mother for Runner's World at the time. And so like all of it was just like the best in terms of expressing your creativity, what you're passionate about. And I didn't necessarily think it would land me into like a brand marketing role, but things just kind of domino effect from there. And it was cool to have that sort of grounding experience. Everyone needs writing skills. I think everyone needs communication skills. There's all different formats of it, but that's the J School, I think, is like top 5 program in the country. So it was a strong one. So that's how I ended up there.
I think creative writing skills are so important and such a hot topic right now in this like digital world that we're living in. For example, I've taken professional writing classes, and some of them they say like, we want you to use AI. We're teaching you how to come up with prompts to write all these emails and reports and things of that nature. And now I'm in another one and it's saying absolutely not, use it maybe for research and outlines, but absolutely no AI. So I think there's just a lot of back and forth about whether that's okay, and it is so important. So I think people need to be reminded of that at its core. Creativity and the form of writing is so important.
Yes, AI is definitely polarizing in the marketing world today.
Yeah.
I feel like it's very polarizing for a lot of my professors as well. Like Grace had mentioned, a lot of them might accept it on their assignments, or some of them are like going out and saying, oh, you're going to use this in your job on the day-to-day. So like, why not take advantage of it right now and learn how to use it to the best of your ability?
And I actually was thinking, like, I know you talked about how at your time in college, like Twitter X was becoming a big thing, and that was changing your curriculum, that was changing the space. I know we kind of already talked about it, but it is, I think, the world of marketing, the world of pop culture, being able to tap into that is so kind of dependent on the innovation and technology and social media. So are you seeing this as kind of another Twitter, another X, where it's like this room for opportunity, or is it also something that like maybe you're kind of more on like the other side of it, where maybe it's kind of taking from creativity? I know there's been some talk in the entertainment industry with that.
As far as AI goes?
Yeah, as far as like AI or just technology, like how do you guys respond to this innovation and fast moving space?
I think for me, it's like two things. I do agree with what you said in terms of like, there is already books around better prompt writing and actually having a better input to get to a better answer or whatever your end use case is for why you're using AI. But for me, in a marketing world, I just think about it as an enabler. It allows us to work faster. We're not replacing athletes. Like you've seen some of the most egregious examples where like you're replacing actual humans with AI. We're not necessarily doing that. I think in some cases it allows us to work faster, whether that's storyboarding or things of that nature. But for the most part, what I've been using it for is really some of that analytical work where you take some of your data and measurement, like a mixed media model and 2 graphs side by side. And I'm asking AI to give me the 3 to 5 bullet points on how you might present that in the simplest way to a large audience. And I think some of those summaries have been very beneficial. And I think that's been a really good tool for me, just in terms of like how we're compounding our thinking, how we're essentially thinking through what are the 1, 2, 3 stack ranked ideas we want to get across. I think it does a good job of organizing some of your thoughts in that sense, but not necessarily ever replacing creativity.
I think data analytics is one of the most productive uses of it in a professional sense, just because storytelling with numbers is so challenging sometimes, especially for people that can't necessarily see the trends in extensive data sets. So for a system to be able to do that in 2 seconds and give you a list of 10 different things that are happening that would have taken you weeks to maybe find otherwise, I think that is an extremely productive way to use it. So very
Yeah,
cool.
for sure. Like if you were ChompCast and you were trying to sell advertising against it, you would probably look at your episode to episode growth,
Right.
create that graph. Potentially, you can drop that into whatever AI platform of your choosing and be able to really put together a deck of sorts to Gainesville Dodge and say, this is why I think you should advertise on this podcast. And so I think it's very helpful. It's very seamless in that sense. But there's always watch outs with every new format, and it takes some adjusting and the learning curve. But I would say, as a University of Florida student, it's always incumbent upon you to be a first mover on all new fronts of technology because you are our best and brightest of the future.
Do you worry about risk with it, like inputting potentially like confidential information for a big company like Under Armour? Do you think putting it into those public systems is problematic?
We don't put it into a public system. We have our own internal platforms, things like that. But yes, that is a watch out for sure for probably any corporate employee. Yes, that is a good question.
Cool.
Perfect. So pivoting a little bit, you obviously start off at legacy brands like Reebok and Adidas, and then you transition to a startup like Overtime. Do you think that there were certain things that you enjoyed about the process or that you may have been shocked by for going into a big company into a much smaller kind of venture?
Definitely. I think when I was thinking about making the jump and going to a small venture-backed startup at the time, which was Overtime, and this is early days, way before it is what it is today with an arena in Atlanta and multiple leagues. This was really, just a social account. To be honest, it didn't even have a TikTok account at that time, so it was a big risk, but also startups were kind of in vogue at the time. I was connected to the founder. The founder is his name's Dan Porter, amazing thinker, serial entrepreneur, definitely an outlier when it comes to the way he thinks about work in the world. And so I found that inspiring. I do think who you work for sometimes is like 90% of the game. And it was an opportunity for me to learn about a different place and space and also sort of ride this wave of like, how can we be experts in youth culture and building a brand. And ultimately, we were not just trying to create a media company. We were trying to build a community, and then we were trying to really build a brand and essentially then a platform for a bunch of athletes, Gen Z focused athletes, build their platforms, build their brands, and create this larger ecosystem. And for me, it was taking a lot of the learnings that I had from working at a big company, providing some of that infrastructure, but then actually trimming away what perhaps slowed things down, perhaps what caused a little bit of us to move in terms of, that whole, I remember I was telling Dan, like, I think we should crawl, walk, run here. And he said, don't ever say that again in a meeting. We only run at Overtime. And so whenever I had an idea and I was like, I think this will take me like 6 months to get off the ground, he was like, come back to me when you can do it in 3. And so that changed my thinking. It also allowed me to test and learn in a really quick way. And if we had an idea and it didn't work out, we were on to the next. So this idea of idea generation was something that continues to stick with me in my current role and continues to be a bit of the focus. So like when you talk about in the very beginning, like I think there's a big piece of marketing in the comments section. We lived in that comment section. We responded to 90% of our DMs at the time. We were very much not a media platform, but someone you intimately knew to a degree. And, we're all living on our phones these days. So it just continued to spark and grow from there, but definitely allows you to just have a bit more diversity in structure, thinking, and execution.
Right.
Yeah, really, Overtime did find such a unique niche that wasn't as much tapped into with new content specifically focused towards Gen Z and having that level of interaction that you're talking about in the comments, in the DMs, really making a connection before worrying about its own brand. And so what were some of the key decisions, key projects that you worked on that helped grow Overtime into the brand that we see today?
Yeah, there were several. I mean, for starters, when I first joined, a big part of my remit was how do we create a lifestyle brand of overtime? And we built an e-commerce platform. We scaled an apparel business with it, and that essentially took off. And that was awesome to see. Just like I would walk. I lived in New York City at the time. The office was in Dumbo in Brooklyn. And almost every day it got to a point where I saw someone wearing an overtime hoodie. And not only did you see someone wearing an overtime hoodie, if you acknowledge them, they would throw up the O, like as if you had your own sort of youth culture coded language. And so, you struck something when that is happening within culture or interpersonal communication. And then this is pre NIL, of course. So we had thought, we had covered LaMelo Ball and some of the athletes that are in the NBA and stars of the NBA at that time, doing YouTube shows with them and storytelling around those athletes. And then we saw LaMelo go to Australia, because NIL didn't exist. So we went and got the bag over there. And that was like, well, if there's an opportunity for us to change the ecosystem of sports in a way, and not have these players have to go overseas in order to get paid, perhaps we can be that solution here. And so we created Overtime Elite. It has evolved so much since the NIL landscape has evolved, but we created Overtime Elite. That is our basketball league. We have 9 teams now, not we, but Overtime has 9 teams now. I was a big part of building what those team identities look like. So, 3 of the teams in Atlanta was Cold Hearts, the City Reapers, the YNG Dreamers. We didn't build them with your typical team name construct in mind. It wasn't like a city like Miami Heat, because it was for the digital generation that wasn't really bound by a city or a hometown or some generational fandom because my dad was a Miami Heat fan or so on and so forth. So it was really just like creating a lot of leagues, but for the digital world. And it's been awesome to see the growth. I think the other day they just announced an official partnership with the NBA, which is great for both sides because, they share a ton of fandom and it's for the youth. But yeah, it was awesome growing that, scaling that. We raised $250 million while I was there. Wow. It was cool to pitch investors around the opportunity and the idea of what we were building and the belief that we had. So you really become passionate about something when you're building it from the ground up and scaling your own, version of your company. And so I think that is something tangible that I'll always take away, especially from a team building perspective and like the team culture there. So a lot of different experiences, but all connected in a really cool way.
And we just had Ben Chase, who's the director of the NIL here at UF, on the podcast as a guest, and he won director of the NIL of the year, which was awesome. Like, he's done so much in the space. And so how are you seeing the NIL, college athletics, kind of changing your work even at Under Armour? I know, of course, it completely changed over time, but how are you seeing it now when you're looking at these partnerships or these up-and-coming athletes, or who is the next face of Under Armour for this campaign or that campaign? What does that process look like?
Process has changed, of course, and it's more competitive, and it's just great, though, from an athlete empowerment standpoint, first and foremost. It allows us to work directly with athletes while they're, in some cases, like completely on this rocket ship journey. And in some cases, they also find that NIL has helped them become far better content creators than they may become eventually a pro athlete, right? The chance of becoming pro, very, very hard, as we all know. And so we have a foundation at Under Armour called UA Next, and it's Pinnacle flagship athlete camps. It's a bunch of our athletic series across football, baseball, volleyball. We bring in a ton of athletes from both high school and even middle school. It allows us to just have a relationship with athletes at a younger age. We've been doing this for a long time before NIL even existed, but it also allows us to work with some of these players and bring them into campaigns. And some of those campaigns are at our retail stores across the world. Some of them are at Dick's Sporting Goods, some of our retail partners in that sense. And you can find some of our favorite players online on our own website as well. So it allows us to just go deeper and richer in terms of storytelling and amplifying their own story.
Awesome. And I also wanted to really quickly ask about, because you're graduating from UF, and I think I may be speaking to this because this is literally my current situation. I feel like also the situation for so many graduates. yes, there are people sometimes who have the job that they interned in their junior to senior year summer, and they have a return offer and they're excited to go do that. And they're very happy that that's like their first job, and kind of see the trajectory of their life. But I think for a lot of people, that's not always the case. And I think even if it is the case, people sometimes may feel like, oh, well, that is my end goal. Like I have to set up my 10-year plan right out of college to do that. And so, I mean, I feel like you graduating, right, doing sports journalism in college, you probably weren't thinking to yourself, like, I'm going to become this part of Overtime. It's going to be this huge startup and all that. Like you can't plan for those opportunities. So my question to you is how, as graduates or people in college, how can you kind of one, focus on what your end goals are, right? Like setting those up, but then also make sure that you're not so tunnel focused where you're closing yourself off to those opportunities. And how kind of do you toe that line between putting yourself in the room and taking the opportunities that are there, or focusing on a long-term goal?
It's a great question. I think it might be a polarizing thing to say, but I don't think you should necessarily have a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. The world's moving so fast. I think you want to leave college with some level of expertise in a subject matter, but the best thing you can do for yourself is one, not take a remote working job so you can meet people and learn about all the different cross functions, whether you work at a big company or a small or mid-level size company. And you want to have some level of knowledge of almost every aspect or facet of marketing or a company, so you can have a conversation with just about everyone in a meaningful way, no matter what room you're in. But yes, I do think it's hard to predict the future, of course, and know where you might end up in your career. But I think I always took some level of calculated risk, and that risk was this idea of like, how can I be on the forefront of change where I think the world is going and where I think trends might be shaping themselves into, and those jobs might be created. So in a lot of different ways, the job that I stepped into, particularly during my time at Adidas, didn't exist before I took the seat. And a lot of that experience, like, compounded for me, made me so much more intelligent and allowed me to try things and fail, honestly, as well. But it allowed me to go to Europe for 2 years and kind of have international experience. I kind of call that like creating my real world MBA, because I knew I wasn't going to ever get my own official true academic MBA. But also, like, getting international experience in your 20s just compounds your intelligence and learning and makes you so much more aware of like cultural nuances and ways in which you as a marketer want to affect people emotionally and drive brand and your story. And so I've been able to take advantage of some of those opportunities and also try and seek them out as well. But in some cases, I tried to just co-write the blueprint of like what that job description might look like, because I felt like the company had this need. And when I went overseas, there was this idea of global key cities, which is now honestly like is part of every big brand's focus, or their board reviews it, or it's talked about in an earnings call. How are we performing in Shanghai, Tokyo, London, Paris, New York, LA, because we know that's where the trends start, or that's where the influencers live, or that's where we want to have our most immersive, best-in-class retail expression, you know? So for me, that was probably always a part of the thinking, but there was also a lot of risk involved. But you just want to know what your risk level is, and everybody's situation is different. But I think you walk away with a UF diploma that prepares you for just about anything, right?
Right. Can you give us some examples of those early risks that you took and the things that put you in a position to have titles that like, I don't know, what were those things that you did that set you apart from other people that, gave you the opportunity to kind of catalyze your career in the way that you did?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of different ways you could think about it geographically. So I moved to Chicago right from Gainesville. I had never been there before in my life, but that's where my first job was headquartered.
Mm-hmm.
Then I moved to Portland, Oregon, had never been there in my life, and couldn't be the furthest place almost in the US. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, so that was so far. And then I moved overseas, and that is lonely, and that is trying, and that is testing. And all of those come with risks, come with opportunities, and things of that nature. And then I moved to New York City, and I spent the past 6 years there before I just moved here to Baltimore, but I moved around a lot, and that's a risk. And some people don't have that comfort level or that desire, and that's okay. But for me, it was a big part of my experience and my continued learning, just living in different places. And then, yeah, to be honest, like when I took the role at Overtime, most of my networks said, "What are you doing?" Because they didn't necessarily see that journey or see the potential in what the company could become. And I had some ideas, I had a vision, and I had a founder who was aligned to that vision, and also obviously a big part of what that vision was. And now I'm at a founder-led company too, and I feel like I have a pretty strong, I don't know what the word might be, but like knack for like working with founders. And there are textbook definitions of like working with a founder, what working with a founder is like. And I think I've been able to really understand that and help drive success in that space. But it's all risk taking at the end of the day. It's just how you want to calculate it and how much experience you want.
I love that sentiment. I think it adds so much value, specifically when you discuss that, you went to Overtime and you didn't exactly, like, certain people like have to think you're crazy to go into certain jobs or go into certain spaces, and actually prove something. I mean, me personally, I grew up watching Overtime. I talked to my friends about it. I mean, I remember the glory days and like, I think it was 2016, 2017, watching the clips. We had Overtime, Megan, Larry. I mean, those were core memories for me in class specifically. So, I mean, just to see that such a small world and see how like you and your team had this idea and created such a large brand from it. I mean, someone had to have been crazy to think of it, but obviously it worked out.
So there's always some crazy one behind every idea, right? But that's life. That's how you move forward with cool things.
Is there something specific that you can recall that you guys did that made it take off so much? Like you guys were something and then you became something huge. Was there like a strategy or, some idea that you guys had that made that skyrocket? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's a great question. It's a bit of a balance though. It's a series of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of small wins, and one day at a time, one consumer or fan or audience member at a time, and making sure that they walked away with an incredible experience, whether that was talking with Overtime Megan or us responding to a DM and helping them on their journey because they want to make it to their high school varsity basketball team. And they just wanted a bit of inspiration or motivation. And I couldn't tell you the amount of we had this community Slack channel where everyone was like sharing screenshots of DMs where like some kids would be like, does Overtime respond? And we responded and their day was made. And then their mother wrote us, like all those incredible stories that you've probably seen time and time again. And then I think it was this next venture where we decided we want to create our own IP and we want to be in the IP creation business. And that was essentially building our own leagues and building our own athlete shows and all of that nature. So that was kind of the next level shift. And that's just a part of evolving as things evolve, but also trying to be on the forefront of change.
Right. Yeah. And I want to take you to today. You serve as the Senior Vice President of Global Brand and America's Marketing at Under Armour. Take us through what a day in your life looks like in that position. What are those meetings that you're sitting in on? What are you kind of like being able to be creative and thinking forward? Because like you said, even most recently in Heated Rivalry and in Stranger Things, like those fun appearances must be not like the main plan for the brand, but like also such an exciting and important component. So just take us through your day, take us through your week.
So those two things are completely unplanned, by the way. And so just to give you some context, like in life, sometimes you get lucky. And as a marketer, sometimes you get lucky. But how do you amplify those moments, of course, and become a part of that story, whether it's the next season or just capturing the social moment at the time? My day is different every day, which is a big part of why I love working in this industry or sports in general, right? Because every season offers a new narrative, a new athlete to hero, a new thematic, a new rivalry, right? And so I think that's a lot of fun, just in terms of if you're someone that likes change and likes, building a story and always having a new story to tell, this is a cool space to be. I also think Under Armour, for me, one of the best challenges you could ever have is like, how do you take a heritage brand like Under Armour and modernize it and get people in your age that love sports, that play sports, that are team athletes, that are forever athletes, like inspired to wear the brand. And so that's my mission, first and foremost, is really this like Under Armour comeback story. It's a brand with so much rich history, so much. They were the original disruptor in the sports industry, right? And how do I bring that disruptor approach back to what that means in 2026? And how do I think about our marketing campaigns and all of our pulse moments across what is a far different competitive landscape than when Under Armour first started? So how do I try and stay one step ahead of the competition from an agility standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint? And how do I really work with all the cross-functional partners and talent that I have on my team to have really cultural shifting creative, really be always on from a storytelling standpoint, and really think about like, what are the tempos we want to get after for the year? What are the athletes that we're looking at that are doing some really great work, and both on field or off field, and or on court or off court, and like work with them and bring them into the brand. So it's never the same each day, but ultimately we're looking at brand marketing, social, we're looking at creative, we're looking at Super Bowl happening next week. What are we doing there? Can't tell you yet, but I think it's going to be really special, just how different of an angle we're coming in at from a football perspective. So I'm really excited. And so, yeah, every day we try and think about some ways to do some groundbreaking work and like shift the hearts and minds of people like you who are wanting to be entrepreneurs or wanting to create a podcast where you have a platform and do some cool, compelling work.
Yeah, and I knew it would be like this on this episode because I'm PR and like this is all just so interesting to me. So for students that are coming in that want to be part of that, they want to be on a creative team where they're thinking of those ideas. I know there's this big kind of discrepancy of the marketing versus communications versus that. What would you say you classify yourself as? A storyteller, a creative, a business? Like, is it are kind of bringing all of that together? Where can students who are interested in doing that, where are they needing to start their careers or look at? That's just probably for more of our niche audience, but
Yeah. Hey, everybody's starting point can be different.
yeah.
And I think that is actually what makes any executive or talent wherever you are at a company special, right? Because you're all coming from a different background and bringing that diverse point of view across what you might do. And some of my best ideas within the sports realm have come from other industries, whether that's like looking at what beauty is doing on TikTok to compare to what we should be doing as a sports brand or an apparel first brand. And so I think pulling from different places is ultimately an amazing thing that you should strive to do. And whether you're in marketing, creative, PR, comms, like it is always a marriage between those functions. And you can't just do one really well. You have to complement the entire ecosystem across the board. So when we know we're launching a new product with a new story or bringing a new ambassador to the brand, the story is sometimes just as compelling as the PR. The PR is just as compelling as the way in which we bring it to the world via social. All those things really need to be in sync to have a high performing team. And so all those perspectives are also always welcome and bring something different to the table. And I would say too, just in terms of like what is really resonating, like some of the most provocative work that kind of shifts your context around, like think about the beverage industry right now and how much innovation there is in the beverage industry, but it's a part of marketing too, that really how much it's expanded and how much it's grown and just how much fun they've been having, right? From the design of the can to the commercial you might see. So I think it's that context is always fun to shape too.
It's also the transferable skill of the different industries because like you said, like not only are you an apparel first brand, but you're also a storytelling brand, you're a platform, you tie so much of course into sports, but you could take the sports component out and you have 100 other components that make up Under Armour. Like the story behind it, and like you could kind of pretty much place it with anything. So I think that's another thing for people that are interested in companies and kind of becoming, there's just opportunity to do that in a lot of companies too. And it's cool that Under Armour, you get to really focus on a lot of those different components. But Adam, what were you saying?
Yeah, I think one of the cool parts about your story is how you've done it on a bunch of different scales. All of your positions have needed a vision, a drive to make the vision happen, and all the different components that come with it. But from overtime to Under Armour, they all happen at different levels with different assets to them. And so the ability to be able to take like your current position, use athletes and building this new brand and keep that same level of creativity is such a unique aspect to it.
Yeah, for sure. You want to flex creatively, but remember, you got to stand on business too. You need to know there's a revenue outcome. You need to know the data behind it. You need to make sure you're driving instrumental change for the brand, for the company. And if you're in the marketing seat, you're spending money, but you always need to demonstrate how there's a return on investment or a return on investment coming. And so you got to learn to stand on the business side too, which has been the most fun. And some of those sort of pairings are what I've been really excited about, particularly in this job right now. But throughout my career, whether it's been marketing and merchandising or whether it's just been commerce in general, content and commerce, there's been a lot of fun things around how all of those interconnect.
Okay, we're gonna go into a rapid fire section.
Touch a little bit about how your whole job is dynamic. There's things that pop up in the news, and so how much of your career would you say comes from planning, and how much is just taking the right opportunity as it comes up and running with it?
60% planning, 40% spontaneous thinking.
Plan spontaneity.
If you gave me more time to think about that question, I'd probably come back with a different percentage. But let's go with it.
What is the most useful mistake you've made in your career?
The most useful mistake I've made? That's a good question.
Or just a mistake, and maybe it doesn't have to be useful.
It's something you learn from.
I think the biggest. This is not a useful mistake. So this is not a good answer. But I've always tried to look back. When I first started at Adidas, I was in charge of working on Derrick Rose, and his business, his signature line. And he went through a couple different knee injuries and different journeys that kind of made the career going ups and downs. And that business case study for me and relaunching an athlete, relaunching the platform and all of that has been, it's been something I've always learned a lot from. And just even seeing most recently, they retired his jersey in Chicago was cool. And I always get slightly emotional when I'm served a TikTok or an Instagram that's just a D Rose highlight reel from like his rookie and sophomore season. There's nothing like it. So, but like seeing that, I think it's a Harvard business case study if there isn't one already. But I got to live through it, so I'm grateful for that.
I'm just so happy you mentioned that. The D Rose ones, I have like the blue ones. I still remember those shoes to this day. So shout out to them. Next question. You teach sports branding at UF right now, which is pretty full circle. Why was teaching important to you?
I thought it was an awesome opportunity to give back to an experience that did so much for me when I was a student at UF. And I still keep in touch with Professor Spiker. Mm-hmm. And when I was, and along the way, he's introduced me to students who are about to graduate or students who are looking for mentorship or want to break into sports. And I've always tried to give my time as much as I possibly could because someone did that for me. And that's how I got my first job. And someone who I cold LinkedIn wrote back in the day when I was just a young kid with no experience, like actually answered me. So I'm always trying to think about how I can pay it forward. That was a way to pay it forward in a real structure. And also, I'll be honest, selfishly, I learned a ton by teaching a class, not only keeping the students' attention, but how they think and what they're up on in terms of trends and how they even like to learn these days. So it was a bit of a co-learning experience for me. And I think sports branding is so fun. And so it was a great experience. I want to do it for the rest of my life. I'm taking a quick break right now just because this job is a bit demanding. But all in all, I do plan on evolving that program and had a really great time doing it. And honestly, even the students that I had in prior semesters have continued to keep me like up on their journey as they've graduated and done good work. And so I'm really happy I had the opportunity to teach at UF.
And talk about mentorship. I think that's so important. I mean, even the podcast, I can speak to that. Every single one of us has cold email, probably like what 100 what every guest you've seen. Like I mean, I cold email you. Like I think that's really how you're actually able to make it. Is it's not maybe just cold emailing, but is taking that time to build mentorship and relationships, and that is sometimes uncomfortable. Like, and you have to kind of get out of your comfort zone to be able to meet someone, to go up to someone in a networking event, to be able to talk to somebody new, and even it's like the current relationships that you have, cultivating those because you never know what's going to happen with all of that. So I think mentorship just overall is one of the biggest pieces of success. So has there been a piece or a advice or maybe something that you live by that a mentor has instilled in you that you feel like you take every day in your career?
I mean, there's so many different things that I've tried to live by. I read Tim Ferriss's book, Tools of Titans, like, I don't know, like 7-8 years ago, probably longer. And at that time, I was based in Germany. I then thought this book was incredible and that the current CMO would love this book, and I gave it to him to read.
Wow.
And then wait, the story gets better. Now he's my boss here at Under Armour.
Wow.
And before I took the job, he was going through his bookshelf or something like that, and the card that I wrote in the book around like why you should read it fell out, and he sent me a picture of it, and he's like, the world whispers to us, right?
Wow.
And this idea of like things come full circle. So I always do believe in that. If there's one takeaway, things do come full circle. You'll never know, what you do or how you make someone feel. Of course, this sounds cliche to say, but you never know when you might meet them 5 years down the line, or they might be a part of your life in a very different capacity. So it's always important to be kind to others. And honestly, you just want to enjoy what you do. So I think that's a big piece of either mentorship or giving back and making sure you're leaving the world better than you had it.
Incredible. So a lot of our listeners are obviously students here at UF. So for those that are listening, what would be advice that you can give them of things that they can do right now? Whether they're sophomores, juniors, maybe seniors graduating, what's something as a college student that you think someone can do to either make themselves stand out or develop themselves to be in a good position for the real world?
Yeah, I think I often get the most reach out often around like, how do I get a job in sports? I really want to break out in this industry, and it is really hard. Like, there's so many applicants compared to the amount of openings within the sports industry at large, or even brand marketing in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think, instead of reaching out and saying, I think you would love to pick your brain, I often think, like, instead of sending me a resume, if you sent me like a TikTok style video of 3 things I think could make Under Armour better. One, I immediately know you're a content native. You understand what a role of in 2026 at an entry level might require. You can actually create content, or you can think on your feet, and you're trying to create opportunities for the company already, or create ideas. I always thought like that would be more powerful than a resume. So if I was going back and I was trying to get a job at Under Armour, that's what I would do. And I would have sent me or someone at the company like, hey, I really think your website could be better. Here's 3 things that I would do differently. And I think sometimes you might get a phone call back, or you might get an email back and have a conversation instead of potentially a more generic inbound message. So some of that is a little bit of like lead generation, but I always think about that in terms of thinking about how to get ahead and how to just separate yourself from several others that are also going for the same role.
Certainly. It's awesome.
I also wanted to just really fast ask about that, because I think personal branding is a big thing throughout life, no matter what you're doing, but especially now with social media, with the world that we live in, I think it's important to be able to focus on yourself as a personal brand and what you're kind of wanting to do. So if you're going into a creative field, right, that of course would manifest in itself in, content creation or things like that, like you just said. But even for our listeners who may not, want to go into a creative field, I think it's important how you present yourself as well and your outward image. So as someone who specializes in brand, do you have an additional piece of advice for just people figuring out who they are, what they want to do, and how they can kind of put their best foot forward to those that they meet?
Because along the way, you'll really find out what you love and what you don't. And so I wouldn't be too hard on yourself in thinking that you have to have it figured out. And I'm realizing I sound like a dad right now, but that's not my intention. But I think just in terms of personal branding or creative thinking, like you should probably give yourself a moment to write. And I try and find at least one part of a day within a week, not every day, to write a sort of thought piece around what I'm thinking. I send my team really long emails sometimes. I give them the warning, but like there's hyperlinks in it because I'm essentially just like giving them a brain dump, but it's a mapping of how I'm thinking of world building within all the things that we're doing. And we do a lot. And so I either, and then when I was at Overtime, as an example, like our CEO wanted me to write on LinkedIn once a week and how I'm thinking about brand, how I'm thinking about shaping sports culture. And so I've tried to keep that mentality because I find that just doing that once a week also like kind of gives me a little bit of grounding in terms of where I'm at and what I'm thinking about and really just plotting the future. So some of those things are really expressions of personal branding that are also really just having good habits. And at the end of the day, you want to have good habits because that's what becomes your personal brand.
Certainly.
Yeah, I think definitely throughout all of your professional work, you have to find ways to stay grounded and stay connected to who you are. And even in the grind of a job search or any of the different opportunities, you finding ways to brand yourself and come across a certain way is really what's going to help stand out. And so, with that, I kind of just want to open the floor to you. If you have any last thoughts, any stories, anything we didn't touch on, or any just like final thoughts for all of our listeners.
Go Gators.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode.
Be sure to check us out at ChompCast Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube.
And make sure to follow our socials at ChompCast Podcast on Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok.
As always, go Gators.